The lock-in tournament is underway, and we are learning quite a few things that we did not expect from these teams before the tournament started. Before we get to any of that, we do have some discussion, a small little update with the Regi investigation. This is Clown Fiesta podcast with Blue Jay and JNT 250, episode 69, and therefore you have to say nice in the comments because that's the law, and I don't make the rules.
This is true.
Now, Jinter, you and I talked about Regi when there was. First of all, let's start with there was Doublelift who came out with some allegations a couple of months ago in the middle of the off season, basically saying that Regi was abusing players, and I don't remember direct quotes, but some pretty controversial things came out from Doublelift, and then obviously with some old videos that surfaced as well that didn't shed Regi in a very good light. And I remember you and I talking about this, and I remember saying strictly, like, please just do an investigation. And finally, it sounds like that's what's happening. Is there anything I'm missing there?
Yeah, I mean, it's just I feel like it's good on Riot to do their sort of due diligence about the situation because there was a very prominent personality in the scene, that being Doublelift, making these accusations, followed up with some previous evidence from 4, 5, 6, 7, even 8 years ago in the case of that Dyrus video on stream, maybe even 9 years ago, honestly. And
Long
it's
time ago.
yeah, it's just I don't know. I just think it's good on Riot because there's obviously something going on, whether it's as big as Doublelift may be making it out to be. I'm kind of siding with Doublelift on this one just because of the history we've also seen. Like if it was just a one-off thing and this was because of the whole Doublelift and Regi hate between each other, it'd be kind of hard to like pick a side. But we have some past evidence, so I just hope we find out what's actually going on.
Yeah, and for people that haven't seen those videos, I'm sure you could find it somehow. They are on YouTube, I believe. But basically, you just see what I would describe as some pretty hard to watch videos. Like it just sucks when you see that one of the owners treats people like that, never mind players or whatever, just any kind of staff like that. However, I will repeat what my take was back then, and it still stands now, and that is that I want to refrain judgment until the investigation is done, because a lot of times things can get blown out of proportion, and there's maybe a lot of information that we don't know. Um, However, I think it's a long shot to convince me that what we saw in those videos is not abuse. However, like I said, I want to refrain judgment and wait to see what they find out in the investigation. The weird thing is that, like, I don't know, and I can't even begin to speculate as to what the repercussions would be if you do find abuse. I know something has to happen, but I have no idea what that would be. But the other thing that I said when we first talked about it is it would absolutely break my heart to find out that this stuff is still happening, because I don't think any players deserve to go through that. Obviously, if you're a pro player in any sport, esport, whatever, you're already under a lot of stress, and the community comes down on you really hard when you don't perform. The last thing you need is the extra pressure of having your boss, uh, well, just flat out humiliate you in front of all your other, what I guess in this case would be coworkers and whatnot. So I'm really glad that they are doing an investigation. It sounds like it's been underway for some time, and they just finally announced it now. Um, and the other thing too is I remember this. I think it was just after Christmas. It was sometime in between our break. I remember I almost tweeted out like, "Hey, remember when we heard that there was player abuse from one of the owners, and then there was no investigation?" I almost tweeted it out, and then I didn't because I was like, it's very possible that they are investigating and they just haven't said anything, and I'm glad I held back on that. But anyways, yeah, I think I've said my piece. Really, really unfortunate, and by the sounds of things, as someone else is pointing out in the chat, it sounds like there was multiple players that have come forward and said that they were affected by this, and the person in the live chat is talking about Acadian. I do remember hearing something about Acadian saying that it wasn't the best environment or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, to come to Reggie's defense just like a little bit, for more of like for the more quote unquote damning videos in the past, I'm talking specifically about the one on when Dyrus was streaming and the other one where he was like yelling at Turtle and like the team van. It's just a very weird dynamic back then, back in the season 2, season 3, season 4 days, because Regi was also a player. So in a
Hmm.
sense, that whole team, like those players might have viewed each other as equals, and Regi at that time might have been an equal, like he could have been considered an equal because he was a player on that team. Yes, he was obviously still the owner, but it would obviously be much more concerning if that kind of stuff was still going on, years and years later, whether that be now, whether that be back with Acadian, whether that was back when Double F was around, both in his first run with TSM and in his second run with TSM after it. So, I think the older stuff, in my eyes, is a little bit more forgivable, but, should it still be going on now to the same extent, that's obviously a big problem because there is a very different power dynamic there when Regi is the owner of the team, is on the team, is, higher up than any of these players will ever be pretty much within TSM. Maybe except for
Yeah,
Bjergsen back in the day.
yeah, and I guess what I would say is you can't like what's out there or what's happened has already happened. The only thing that would upset me is if this continued on for what is now probably around 10 years, maybe plus. Who knows? Because I mean, we're season 12 now. TSM. When did TSM start? Was that in season one or
Season 1
season two?
probably.
That yeah. Anyways, it's been a long time, and what I hope for is that this hasn't been happening for the whole last decade or so. But again, the investigation will be done, and hopefully we I mean, I hope we find out that it hasn't been happening, and if it has, then I mean, something needs to happen. I don't know. Again, I can't even begin to speculate what the repercussions would be, but it has to be something. You
Hmm.
can't just let that slide just because it's TSM, and I don't think the league will do that. I've heard that opinion. I've heard people say that Riot will just let it go. I would say it's possible, but I don't think so. I don't think you can excuse something like that. But yeah, pretty crazy, honestly.
Well, that's old news anyway. We got lock in.
Anything else on it? You're done with that? You want to get the lock in?
We got lock in. It started on Friday. I'll pull up the group standings now. As you can see, C9 EG topping the groups in Group A and Group B respectively, 3-0. 100 Thieves and TL, who were probably the favorites in each group, are actually just below them at 2-1 apiece. Initial thoughts, in terms of the gameplay, what did you think?
Okay, so I don't. I know there's a lot of people that are ready to dog on the gameplay, and I can definitely see why because it is lower. But I think that's what you come to expect in lock-in, right? That's one of the benefits of having a lock-in tournament is that the play isn't going to be to a high level, and I think most people understand that. Overall, there's a lot of good things as well. Even though there's a lot of bad, there's a lot of good as well. Clearly, we're looking at EG that's 3-0, and we're seeing some that was a lineup that I mentioned just last week that we don't know what to expect out of two rookies and a bunch of roster swaps. Like so that like EG looked pretty damn good. So there, like I said, there's some good, there's some bad. The Immortals, obviously, I didn't expect them to go 0-3. I was expecting them to be a contender to win this tournament. And well, it looks like they might not even make it through. Or I don't even know. Maybe they're already eliminated. I'm
They
not sure how
are,
that works.
because they've lost to
So,
CLG, who's a one-win team.
so how many teams are eliminated from each group?
Only one team in each
One.
group, but just the way
Okay.
that the groups went, Golden Guardians and Immortals have already been eliminated because should they win their match and then, you know, they're losing the head to head between TSM and CLG. Like Golden Guardians already lost to TSM, so the head to head is 0-1, and Immortals already lost to CLG, so the head to head is 0-1, so literally it just doesn't matter. But
Yeah.
kind of just to go back on your points about like the gameplay and people are saying it's terrible, like I think it's a bit of a domino effect, like you said, like it's a new season. People haven't been practicing as hard as they have been, or at all, or very minimal. Plus, teams are not using their full rosters and might have, half academy, half main roster, or you're just using their whole academy roster, which is just generally a lower level of play. So it's a bit of a
Yeah.
domino effect. I think, if we look back to last year's lock in, like it didn't start off very good. Like, dude, do you remember like TSM like straight up running it down? Huni was just griefing games. Like, C9
Fudge was
was
as
yeah,
well.
C9 wasn't looking very good. They were like 2-2 in their group, or I think, or 3-1. So people got to hold their horses, sort of.
I remember Dignitas. I'm pretty sure they got eliminated after the first week, and then they had like a pretty good spring.
Yeah,
Um, that they were there was a lot of talk about Dignitas after the lock-in tournament about how they were this NA team that was actually pushing for a playoff spot, and
there's your
they were able
immortal
to take
scopium.
games off of good teams. Yeah, there is the Immortals copium right there. But yeah, all this to say that it's totally normal, and I know that's not some wild take, but that's the truth. It's not this isn't groundbreaking news to see some teams just really struggle out the gate. And yeah, like you said, with the academy players, that I mean that just sucks, and that's kind of what you expect. They kind of got rolled when it comes to TSM Golden Guardians kind of thing.
Hmm. So,
Uh, Go ahead.
yeah, I was gonna say let's hop into Group A. Obviously we got
Mhm.
Cloud9 3-0 at the top. We did mention last week that they are not using their full roster. They do have some of their academy members in, specifically Darshan, Sven, and Isles. But we did get to see, Blabber and Fudge. Fudge making his mid debut. Honestly, looks pretty solid. I know he's not going up against the toughest in competition. He went up against Ryoma, Takui, and what's Takeover is the TSM Academy's mid learner name, correct?
Yeah, I think so.
So not the toughest competition, and I think we saw what we expected coming into the season. Fudge was obviously he ended up becoming a very good laner in sort of the back half of 2021, where we saw at MSI and we saw at Worlds, and he was pretty lane dominant. We saw kind of like some of the stats that they were pulling up on the broadcast for like fastest mythic item, and Fudge was like top 3 in all instances because he's farming really well, and it's going to be a bit of a experiment with this whole Fudge mid thing, but it looks good so far.
Yeah, I think that coming into this tournament, the general consensus around Fudge was that he's not going to be that great because it's a role swap. Obviously, he's not going to be the best mid laner, and no one expects that. And I think what we got is that he didn't really stand out whatsoever. And if you're a Cloud9 fan, I would say that's exactly what you want, because you shouldn't expect him to stand out, whether good or bad in any way. Like, if anything, you should expect him to stand out in a bad way, honestly. And the fact that he didn't stand out means that he's probably just holding his own. And that's a very good sign, considering that how much he was able to improve last year when he was just absolutely running it down in the top lane. And then towards the end of the year, he was just 1v9ing in the top lane. So with the improvement arc that we saw last year, and again, you can't copy and paste that to this year, it is a good start for Fudge in the mid lane.
Hmm.
The other piece is Blabber. I think I struggle to say this, but I'm going to say it anyways. I think Blabber was the best player we saw this weekend. The reason why I struggle to say it is because obviously they played against what I would say is obviously subpar competition.
Yeah, two
But
full
Blabber looked
academy
great.
teams.
But Blabber looked great though. Like, he did look like the best player this weekend. I would say Vulcan's close behind. But the point is, he looked amazing, and that's a good sign as well. I can't give him a bunch of credit when you're smashing on TSM Academy, Golden Guardians Academy, and FlyQuest. But I can say that he looked like the best player, and so I got to give him that.
Yeah, I wonder if like spring split Blabber is going to be a thing because he kind of always seems to just when the season starts, he's just smashing everybody. You go back to the start of season 10, you go back to the start of season 11 when he had those two MVP performances, and just go back to last year's lock in when he was literally playing Olaf every other game and just annihilating people, going up 40, 50, 60 CS, 15 to 20 minutes into the game, pretty like averaging like 6 or 7 kills a game. They were kind of doing this. This is also when like Cloud9 was doing some like enchanter experimenting, and they were having Fudge play like Lulu Karma top, or they would have Perkz play Lulu Karma mid, and it's just all about Blabber right now. And I think I wasn't really expecting Cloud9 to be super dominant. I don't even think they were dominant in the 3 of their games. I think they were just playing textbook League of Legends. Farm your
Yeah.
lanes, push your lanes, get dragons, get Dragon Soul, win the game. That's literally what they did every time. It's kind of what Cloud9 always seems to fall back to when either they've changed something or they're coming into a new season, because I think ever since the start of season 10, when Sven kind of came into this team, Cloud9, they play for bot push, they play for mid push, Blabber goes around, takes every jungle camp, and they do every single dragon on spawn, and that's what we just saw. All 3 games, it wasn't even close.
Yeah, and you mentioned how he played last year with Perkz. I would even go back a year again before that with how he played with Niski. That was his MVP split the year before that. So just reinforcing the idea of Spring Blabber being usually the better jungler in the league. So there's that as well. The other player to point out is Sven. I don't know if I mentioned this last week. If I'm repeating myself, I'm sorry, but I don't think Sven expects to be the backup ADC as the year goes on. I think he knows that it's not his spot right now, but I think the reason why he stayed with C9 is because he thinks that he could re-earn or get back his starting spot. And I think a good start to that goal would be what he's done so far in lock-in, because he's looked great. I was really impressed specifically with his Jin ulties. If I'm getting really specific, I remember in the one game against TSM, he was just predicting a Kali movement, a very what we'll call slippery champion, and just landing his ultimates. And of course, he gets a pentakill
Yeah,
in
not a
the
Ziggs
so far.
gameplay, dude. Come
Yeah,
on,
yeah,
you're a Ziggs
yeah.
aficionado.
Yeah. So, anyways, all this to say that Sven's had a really good start as to what I would say is his goal is to re-earn his spot. And I think that he's still far from that, but definitely a good start towards that.
Mhm. I wonder just in terms of, what Sven's thought process is, in terms of staying on Cloud9, if it's, yes, he's that confident in his own skills, or is it just like, this is a import ADC coming over from Korea, hasn't really even played, that much competitively, hasn't even played on, the Premier League in said region, and I kind of wonder like if his thinking is like, oh, I'm just a better player, or this guy might fail, so I have a better chance because of that.
My guess, and again, just to be clear, this is all speculation, but my guess would be not even so much that he thinks Berserker will fail, but he probably didn't get an offer from another top team. This was one of his only ways to stay on what he probably considers to be a top team to go back to Worlds. And even if it's like in his head that he won't for sure get a starting spot, he doesn't want to be a starter on CLG or something of the likes. So he probably decided to stay on Cloud9 and said, "I'll risk it and try to fight for my spot back." That's a guess. That's if I'm Sven and I'm competitive like he is, um, that would be what I would do. Honestly, I want to go to Worlds, and I know this is people might laugh at this, but he probably wants to still try to win Worlds, because that's your goal if you're a pro player for most people. So that would be my guess. I think that he probably was like, "Can I get on a top team? No. Is this the only top team I could stay on? Yes. I'll try to get my spot back."
Yeah.
That's my guess.
I wonder also, kind of moving forward when we do see Berserker come in eventually, kind of what the dynamic is in terms of how Cloud9 wants to execute using Sven. Whether they just straight up sub him in and out for Berserker, or if they're kind of going to do like a bot lane duo thing, if we throw it back to season 8 when they were doing the pairing of Svenskar and Golden Glue and then Blabber Jensen, like if, one of them is not playing well, or if one of them's struggling, or if they think they need a change, are both players going to come in, or is it just going to be that one? So I kind of wonder if, Sven and Isles are going to work in a tandem similar to how Golden Glue and Sven Skaren were, and, how often we might even see them come in. We might even see, different guys come in for like draft purposes. I know, Sven is a pretty big mage player in terms of his proficiency on that. Same with Enchanters. He played some Seraphine, he's played some Ziggs, he's played some Syndra, he's playing Swain back when Swain bot was meta in like season 8, season 9. So, it'll be interesting to see. I still like Sven. I think he's one of the better ADs in the league. It just in terms of like relative to everyone else. So it's just kind of hard
He
to just see that guy like not be playing.
He definitely underperformed last year in comparison to what we would have expected out of Sven, since coming over from Europe. I mean, he even underperformed when he was with TSM as well. But I still agree with the idea that you're saying that he's still probably one of the better ADs in the league. And I think you bring up good points that maybe there is some flexibility there if you need him to play a mage or something like that in the bot lane. That's something that I hadn't really considered, but that's also possible, right? Who knows how the meta is going to shift? That could be something that helps him get his spot back as well. Anything else on Cloud9 before we move on to 100 Thieves?
No.
So before we move on, I do want to remind people to hit the subscribe button on Twitch and on YouTube. We certainly appreciate the people that keep coming back. And I'm gonna put some emotes in the live chat for people that um, don't know what they look like. Um, we do want to get some more emotes, but I think people really do like the Yasuo one, so we got a new emote. So if you want to sub or drop a prime, feel free to do so. Okay, let's do 100 Thieves now. Probably the tournament favorite, definitely my tournament favorite. Not everyone, a lot of people did have TL as theirs, but certainly one of, and they dropped the game to what is obviously one of the lower tier teams in FlyQuest. Should we panic, Jane?
Nah.
Of course not, honestly.
Yeah, it was
Um,
a weird one, because this was the first game they ended up putting Tenacity in, and he was
mhm.
kind of on a different champion in comparison to his perceived playstyle from amateur and from academy. He was on the Kennen, a pretty prominent champion that came into the meta towards the end of the season and was a pretty big answer into other AP top laners and even some AD top laners. But he was not really doing a whole lot.
We saw him play the Kennen into the Gwen, and Gwen on Kumo didn't really fall too far behind in that game when he's playing the Gwen. Apparently, you're supposed to have like it is Kennen favorite. I was hearing who was I don't really know the top lane matchups that well, or that specific matchup anyways. I do remember hearing that it's actually more Kennen favored, and even though he did get a small CS lead, I wouldn't say that he did much with it. But I also don't want to take too much away from him because I also thought Kumo just had a really good game. To be fair, Kumo just played slow, scaled, and then had a really nice TP flank in that game. So even though 100 Thieves lost to FlyQuest, to me, that was a game that I thought FlyQuest just played really, really well. And we'll talk about FlyQuest in just a bit. I want to go back to the whole Someday and Tenacity thing because I was convinced that they would be starting Tenacity for all of these games. Um, I and when I saw Someday start the first two, I definitely thought, okay, we're gonna see Someday through the whole year. And then we saw Tenacity play the third game, and I wonder if they thought that this was probably a free win anyways. Let's try to get
Yeah.
Tenacity some reps. Like, would you blame them for that though? Because the lock-in tournament technically is a tournament that doesn't really count. You already have 2 wins, so you're gonna move on. And you're like, well, let's try to get some reps in for Tenacity. It makes sense, doesn't it?
And FlyQuest hadn't looked particularly good at all in their first 3 games, despite winning one of them.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's that as well. Any thoughts? How have your opinions on the matter changed, J and T? Do
I
you
don't
fully
know.
expect like I don't know what to expect anymore. I thought that I was confident last week. Now I have no confidence on who's starting top this year.
I still think he'll probably get in for another game. Obviously, they're going to roll with Someday in their match against Cloud9, which is going to decide first place in this group, which will just give you a very, it'll give you an advantage, obviously, moving forward because you're going to get the weaker team of the 4 teams in your group for the quarterfinal match. But I wouldn't be surprised if we see him, get in there anymore, whether it's in the quarterfinals, whether it's, they want to start him, or if they go 1-0 up, they're going to put him in, or if he gets, some time in the best of 5 if Sunday's struggling, I think we'll see him again before lock-in's over. He was obviously put on the main roster for a starting reason. He's on the team because of a 6-man roster. He doesn't have an academy spot. He's not going to be playing academy games. And I'd be pretty surprised if they did that and then didn't play him at all. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, so my thoughts were if you still weren't sure about who you were going to be starting top, I thought you would just see Tenacity anyways. Because again, we've seen Someday for years. You kind of know what you're getting, especially Someday with those 4 other teammates. Like maybe you would want to learn about how Tenacity plays with Closer and Abadage and, well, the whole lineup. So my thoughts were if you weren't sure, you would just go with Tenacity. And if you saw Someday, then you were pretty sure that you were going to go with Someday for the rest of the year. So that's kind of where I'm swaying now. And I think they just wanted to give Tenacity a couple reps. Maybe it's just the one game. I don't know. But now I'm more confident that we're going to see Someday. But truth be told, I can't even begin to predict because I just did not think we would see Someday start those games in the first place.
Yeah, but no need to hit the panic button. If they look like
Of
shit
course
against
not.
Cloud9, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe like everyone's getting gapped, then you can hit the panic button. But once again, like this is lock in. It's the time for experimentation. Whether it's you're putting in tenacity, whether it's you're trying out different team comps. So we'll just see. I think they'll be fine.
As far as their performance is concerned, I did think that Abadage looked a little bit lackluster. Honestly, just getting picked, taking lazy pathing from time to time, not really making too much happen. So I expect a little bit more out of Abadage. The other thing too that I'll say is that it did seem like the bot lane wasn't able to make play. Again, I mentioned this last week that I thought they would be most hurt by the TP plays for bot. A lot of times they would be able to build up a bot lane lead or at least get the lane in a position that they want to be able to make a play. And it didn't seem like they were able to make any plays in the bot lane, which was one of the worries that I had for this team. The way it did look is it looked like a lot of times they would just settle around drag and hope for the enemy team to start a fight with them that they could ultimately win. But it didn't happen too often. Most of the time they just got the dragons for free. And so my guess for now, even though it's only 3 games, my guess for now is that I think instead of trying to make plays happen around bot dives or bot TP plays behind the enemy bot lane, as far as like a TP flank goes. I think they will just try to play the same way and try to get a fight in the bot lane, but more so at the dragon pit by just starting up drag. That's what I expect to see from one of these.
Yeah, we'll just see, I
Um,
guess.
anything about closer?
Not really.
No, I thought he looked okay. Again, specifically in the game against FlyQuest, I expect more to be able to happen because FlyQuest wasn't exactly smashing any of their lanes. I expect a little bit more out of the jungler in that kind of game. But again, I did mention before, and I guess this would be a good segue to talk about FlyQuest. I thought FlyQuest played such a good game against 100 Thieves. And specifically, I got to shout out my boy Kumo because I just did not give him any respect last week. And I thought he had such a good game against them. I mentioned just a few minutes ago his Gwen game was fantastic. The TP flank that he had against 100 Thieves, I think, secured the game for them. But also, it made me start to wonder if maybe one of the reasons why we haven't seen Kumo perform so well in the past is perhaps because he's not a guy that's going to play for lane. He's just a guy that's going to usually play weak side and play slow and try to scale. And that's kind of what we saw this weekend with the Gragas, I guess, but mostly with the Gwen in that game. And I realize that I am getting a bit ahead of myself because it's only one weekend of lock in, but I'm going to keep my eye more on him because I don't think I gave him any respect last weekend or last week when we did the episode. And I think we did see some good come out of him.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, I mean, I think the standouts on FlyQuest for me was their bot lane, Johnson and Aframu. Um, when these two guys were together on Dignitas at the end of season 10 for the summer split, um, I think both of us agreed on that these guys were like pushing up to be a top 3 bot lane in the league, and was one of the main reasons why Dignitas was even in a playoff spot come summer split in the first place.
Yeah.
Because they were playing really well together, and they were a really great duo. I mean, this was Johnson's rookie split. Aframu at the time sort of seemed to be on the tail end of his career, but kind of had a bit of a resurgence. That
Hmm.
split specifically, then in season 11 with Neo, he made Neo look great. And then seeing these guys paired up together now on FlyQuest, and it feels like we're back to the Johnson and Aframu of old.
Yeah, I have to agree 100%, specifically with Afro. I wasn't too impressed with Johnson, but I wasn't disappointed either. But I thought this weekend we saw a lot of plays being made by Afro, and I think that's something they really missed last year because I don't think we really saw that out of Diamond. Or what was the other support's name? I can picture his face, but I can't think of his name.
Dreams.
Dreams, yes. We didn't see much engage and much happening whatsoever, and we saw that this weekend with Leona, with Bard, and his Thresh. We saw some really good things from Afro this weekend, and so that to me is a very good sign. The other thing is, I also have to give props to Jose Diodo again in that game against 100 Thieves. A lot of picks were started with his Xin Zhao, just
And that was
anticipating
broken.
some of the pathing that Abadage was going to take and picking him off that way, buffering his Q that you see most Xin Zhaos do, and picking off the AD carry. Two really big things that that Diodo did in that game, and so um, I think that FlyQuest is in a much better place rather, if you have those players that can find picks and get you advantages. And I think that's what we saw from Jose and Afro this weekend.
Yeah, and I guess the last player to quickly touch on is, kind of their big signing this offseason, Takui, or from the LFL, Toucan Sam, as I will call him from now on. I thought he was decent. I mean, I thought his laning was pretty good, but it seemed that his, kind of mid-late game macro wasn't so good. He got caught out, I meant to say, quite a few times in a few different games. But he seems to be a decent laner, and I think that's one of the most important things, especially in this state of the game, where the first 15 minutes is so important. Whether that's getting a CS lead in lane, whether that's getting pressure in your lane to go help your jungler, to get scuttle crabs, to get rift heralds, to get dragon control. Dude, I think maybe it's a bit of an overreaction, but I think FlyQuest is going to be all right with this roster.
Yeah, I have a lot more faith in seeing them after this weekend than I did before. Now, I'm not going to lie. I still think that they're most likely to be a bottom team, but there's more hope, I'll say. Let me put it that way, because I was expecting a ninth or 10th place team, and now I'm kind of expecting somewhere in the 6 to 8 range, which I know isn't anything much better, but I do think there is a little bit of hope that they can take some games off. On the Tukui discussion, the one thing that stood out to me was last year I remember Jizuke saying that like when he came over to North America, it didn't seem like there was anyone really trying to win the lane. It was very passive, and he was surprised by that. And I was reminded by that comment watching Tukui this weekend because he trades a lot and is very aggressive in lane. And so I'm expecting to see a lot of solo kills one way or the other, whether it's him getting the
Mhm.
kill or him dying. Um, just after what we saw this past weekend. And I realized that most of the things that we're going to talk about this weekend are going to be overreactions, but that's what I'm hoping for because I noticed he's trading over and over and over, and he's not afraid to keep trading and play aggressive. And so I think that regardless of how he performs, I think it'll be interesting to watch FlyQuest with Takui in the mid lane.
Yep. And then obviously rounding a Group 8, we have TSM and Golden Guardians at the bottom. Kind of expected, I guess. I think people thought that TSM at this point probably was going to be better than FlyQuest just because of FlyQuest's overall perception that they were going to be a bad team.
Yep.
But I mean, we're not surprised by this. They're running their academy rosters. In TSM's case, these are probably 5 players that are never going to see any play in the LCS, at least in the spring split, maybe in the summer split if spring split goes doomed. But the main thing for me that really sticks out on the TSM side is Viper just seems to get kind of worse and worse the more we've seen him play. It felt like he was going to potentially be a promising rookie when he came in on FlyQuest. He went over to Dignitas, didn't look very good. You know, this is another thing that we always talked about at the tail end of Season 10, where like, man, Lorlo is just better than Viper, and Lorlo should be playing games over Viper. And Viper was a big reason why Dignitas looked so terrible in that first playoff series they had. And I was just like not impressed at all with this 3 games so far.
Yeah, it really, the thing is for me watching TSM this weekend, it felt like nothing was happening. The most painful game was the C9 TSM game because TSM just did absolutely nothing. You mentioned earlier how like it wasn't like C9 was styling on them; they were just playing a clean game and just getting all the objectives. That's exactly what we saw. Like I, Blabber goes over to drag, picks up drag, not contested. He gets the next one, gets the next one. TSM isn't really ganking anywhere. They had like one gank in the top lane against Darshan's Gragas, and it didn't really matter because all he had to do was just build armor that game. So
Yeah, and he just started dancing on these guys. Like in
yeah,
multiple team fights, Darjan's just dancing in the middle of 4 people.
that was the only interesting thing that happened that game was that Darshan is just dancing on Gragas in the middle of these team fights. Um, Needless to say, it was pretty disappointing, and not even so because I expect more out of the academy players, but just because C9 versus TSM is supposed to be hype and supposed to be a good game, and it just wasn't. Just
Yeah.
nothing really happened. C9 got whatever they wanted whenever they wanted, and then the game just ended. And I don't even want to say much more about TSM because I shouldn't expect anything. It's an academy lineup, but it's just it sucks to watch. What can I say?
Yeah. And then we have Golden Guardians, again, running the full Academy roster. Um, it's the fucking battle for last place, this coming week when TSM does face Golden Guardians. Or did they already play? No, they didn't play.
Uh
But it's the battle for last place. Um, who fucking cares, man? Like,
Honestly, I don't even blame you for that sentiment because it is, yeah. Someone in the live chat, my LP saying might as well have make it Academy lock-ins. Honestly, it's true. It just sucks. I don't know what else to say. I don't expect them to perform well, and they're not. So everything's going according to plan. The games are boring. Let's be blunt about it. The games are boring. Um, I don't know if we ever got an explanation as to why Ablaze Olive isn't playing or lost or any of these guys that could. I know Olay. I think he had some visa issues or something like that. And I realized they just subbed in the academy team, but like, shouldn't you still be able to just throw a Blaze Olive in? No, like, would
or
that be so
Licorice,
bad?
or
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think we ever got an explanation for that, did we?
that's another thing that sucks. Is like half of these teams didn't even say anything. Like they were just like, okay, we're playing. Here we go.
Well, neither did Riot. So,
I mean, fair enough.
by the way, you have a lock-in tournament starting. Should we hype it up? Nah.
Should we know who's
Let's show a
playing?
video of
Nah.
Captain Flowers high-fiving for a minute. Okay, good. Glad we've hyped up the tournament. Okay, let's try to be a little less pessimistic and swap over to Group B because there were some pretty interesting things that happened over in Group B. We got to start with EG. This is, like I said, this is the team that I'm most excited to see what they do for this year because of the huge, we'll say, gamble, quote unquote, of going with JOJOPYUN and Danny. So far, paying off pretty good, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. EG looked great. Um,
Yeah.
but to be honest, didn't have anything to do with JoJoPyun or Danny. It was all inspired in Vulcan. I mean, those guys played really well this past
So
weekend.
they did. I think Vulcan, like I mentioned before, I think he was probably just behind Blabber as far as the best player we saw this weekend. I still would say that Danny and JoJoPyun still looked good though.
Well, I'm
It's just
just
that they have also good teammates surrounding them as well
for
that
sure.
are looking
I
good
mean,
as well, which
I'm
is
not
like
faulting them.
that's a good problem to have, problem. Um, yeah, really, really good start. The only guy, and I have to be honest here, I didn't think Impact looked that great this weekend.
No,
The game versus
he was having
TL
some
was
fun for sure.
yeah, the NAR game versus TL was like, what the hell am I watching? Fortunately for him, Bwipo was kind of sprinting it on his end of the game as well. But any other? Let's not get let's not go to too many things at once. Let's keep on the Danny and Jojo Pyun stuff for now because these are the guys that people are more worried about. Was there anything stand out to you, especially Jojo Pyun, seeing as it was his debut?
Not really. I feel like we're gonna learn the most about, how this EG team is gonna look, specifically with regards to Danny and Jojo Pyun, is when Inspired and Vulcan aren't having the best of games and aren't generating these big leaks and aren't, just hardcore controlling the map. I think the TL game wasn't exactly that because it was basically just a bloodbath in the top lane. Um,
Hmm.
but when you looked at the games versus CLG and Immortals, like EG just did whatever they want, similar to the Cloud9 situation. Like they were pretty much just playing pretty clean for the most part. The Immortals game did get a bit bloody. At some point, there were a couple plays where Vulcan and Inspired were going a little bit too ham. Vulcan was doing a bit of inting at the back half of that Immortals game. But I think EG, I feel like we'll see their true colors when they fall behind and, what happens there.
That is a really good point because it's easy to praise when you're seeing things going their way. Um, but yeah, you're right. Not It's not going to be like that the rest of the split or year for that matter. And so it will be interesting to see how they play under different scenarios or different drafts or any of that stuff. With that said, I think that the way I kind of judged um, Fudge is kind of the way I'll judge Jojo Pyun. It's you're coming into a tournament with not high expectations. It's just that people want to see you get better as the split goes on. No one's expecting him to join and just be this absolute monster. And he didn't really stand out in any bad way. And as long as you're not standing out in any bad way, that is a success, I think, because that means you belong where you are at the very least. So I would say it definitely have to be a good start for them. Um,
It also feels
and
like it's a good meta to just like kind of enter the league in where, I mean, for the most part,
Corky,
until we see some nerfs, you're playing a Zero or Corky, or sorry, Victor or
Corky,
Corky.
Victor,
I
yeah.
was gonna say Corky and Victor have become the new Corky Azir in terms of like mid gets sleeper. You just pick these champions and you scale, and there's really just not a lot of pressure on Jojo Pyun's shoulders. It's just like don't feed early game and you're going to be fine and you're going to be dealing a lot of damage in team fights. Is kind of more, it seems to be at least right now, about jungle support and how you control the map.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Anyways, really good start for EG. I want to transition to TL a little bit because I think, like I was mentioning before, the Impact matchup with Bwipo was probably one of the bigger shit shows that we saw over the weekend. And it's so strange because if there's a matchup that you shouldn't be concerned of a clown fiesta, pun intended, happening, it would be Impact versus Bwipo that you would expect to see some solid gameplay out of, even if it is the start of the year. And that game was just an absolute mess. Any thoughts on that matchup, Ginger?
And this is no surprise to me. Bwipo has had some four fun games in his time in the LEC. It is no surprise at all to see, he just fights top, man. And if he's ahead or behind, like he'll just fight. And he'll reach a certain point where, he might be like 2,000 gold down, 3,000 gold down, and if he sees an angle, he's going in. He's not a type of player who's just gonna sit back and lose gracefully. Like he's going out.
Yeah,
So
and you know my thoughts on the matter. I always say that aggressive play is generally better than passive play. I think most people agree with that sentiment. And so I think that it's a good thing, even if, yes, he will run it every now and then, and he certainly did in that game. Um, I think you could still expect to see good things out of Whippo. You want someone that's decisive and that's going to try to get the lead rather than just wait for the lead to come to them. So even though that Scion game was kind of a mess, I think we can forgive. Um, we have to talk quickly about the Hullbreaker and the redemption.
Oh yeah.
Um, yeah. So I, I think the weird thing about the Hullbreaker is that he's playing it on Scion. If you were playing more of a split push champion, I think it would be more understandable.
Scion's a big Hullbreaker champion, but I think the main question is like, is Hullbreaker good and competitive? Because you can't just like exclusively split push.
Well, you can maybe. That's what my point was going to be, is that you usually want the Scion to be able to be your front line in team fights and whatnot, in which you lose value of the hull breaker there. So I wouldn't consider him necessarily to be a split pusher per se. I've heard back and forth on it wasn't as bad as it looked, and the build's okay, and the build's awful. I've heard a bunch of varying opinions. To me, I think there's definitely some other split push champions that you could run that with, that you could get more out of that item with. As far as the redemption goes, um, I only remember seeing him use it the one time, and that was like the fight was over and he's dying, and he tries to save just himself with the redemption, and then he ends up dying anyway. So the redemption didn't look too great either, but I don't know. It was just something that I thought was really funny and thought we could bring it up.
Yeah, I don't know. I wasn't like too like concerned with the redemption third and everyone be like, oh, why the fuck does this guy have redemption? It's just like, dude, we've seen redemption, third item on some tank champions in the top lane. Like Ornn can go redemption third item, Shen can go redemption third item. Like, it's not a huge surprise to me, at least. I think on Scion, it's a little bit weird because you either want to build like a full tank item or you want to build, a healthy D item. Like, I would have rather him build like Titanic Hydra or something. I think Titanic Hydra, that item is, I think, sleeper broken. I'm surprised we haven't seen a lot of people build that item on whatever the hell they're playing, because I think that item's really good.
Yeah, and that's what a lot of the criticism was a lot of people were saying that that item should be built.
Oh, it should. Like, but I don't think redemption is like that out of the question where it's just like, what the hell is this? This is the most random thing I've ever seen. Because, support quote unquote items a third on top tank champions, especially ones that stack a lot of HP, like the Shen, like the Ornn, like the Scion, is not like out of this world crazy.
Um, we also have to talk about Bjergsen, of course. Bjergsen makes his LCS debut again? Question
Mm-hmm.
mark. His return, we'll call it. Um, Nothing honestly too crazy for me. I thought he played okay. I will say that I thought it was funny that like 2.5 minutes into his first game, he gets first blood, and I was like, "Wow, okay, well, that's kind of. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was all Santorin. Like it was a Santorin Trundle gank
It's the
where he just flash
Santorin
chomps someone.
special. He does it
Yeah,
every single game he plays
yes, he
Trundle.
does.
He does. He clears his red side jungle. He walks mid, flash Qs, follows up with the pillar after the enemy mid flashes, and they kill mid. Literally happens every single game. Like, I'm not
But
even memeing.
regardless, no, I know. But regardless of who should get the credit for that kill and the gank, obviously it's more Santorin than Bjergsen. Isn't it kind of like, wow, like Bjergsen's back for 2.5 minutes and he gets a first kill? Like that's kind of like, I don't know. I just thought it was interesting, I guess.
Yeah, I didn't think the Bjergsen debut was anything special. I think, the TL games themselves were kind of all about, top lane and bot lane. Whippo, yes, he was very hot and cold in some of these games, cold in the Scion games, but was popping off in that last game they played against CLG with the Graves, flashing into 4 people, getting 1v4, getting kills. He was going off.
Hmm. Um, I guess we should talk about the bot lane because we got a weird little scenario going on there.
Mm-hmm.
We saw both iterations, and for people that don't know, we don't know exactly when Corey JJ is going to get his green card and be able to play and have TL run their full roster. But for now, we're seeing Corey JJ with Yon. I don't Yeon. I've heard different pronunciations. And then obviously Hansama and Ayla. Uh, which stands out to you as being the better of duo?
I like the Hansama Ayla one.
So do I.
Yeah.
And it's not even a knock on Core, obviously. It's not even a knock on Yon or Yeon. But Ayla looked pretty damn good this weekend,
Mm-hmm.
so that's a good sign, right?
Yeah, I mean, Team Liquid was literally just playing Thresh. Very strong champion right now. But Ayla kind of, he was looking kind of core JJ-esque, in those 2 games where he was playing aggressive in lane. They were looking for kills early on. And then he was finding good roam timings to go, either save somebody with the lantern or just, get vision, whatever. Just felt like he was a little mini core JJ. And
Hmm.
to go to the other side of things with Core JJ and Yeon, obviously, people could just point to like, oh well, that was the one game they lost, so obviously Ayla and Hansama looked better. I just think that the difference between Yeon and Ayla is the more Ayla favored side of things,
Right.
and
And
that's
I
that's
think
why I
that's,
would go with
yeah.
that.
Yeah, I think so too. And the other thing is we don't know how long. Like I said, we don't know how long it's going to be before Core JJ gets his green card. And so, even though I think most people were anticipating this just being a couple week thing, and that still may very well be the case, there's no guarantee that this doesn't last a month or two or whatever it is. And JNT reminded me earlier that when they had these kind of problems with Broxa, was it how long ago was that? 2 years ago now?
Yeah,
Um, it was quite a while before Broxa was starting for Team Liquid,
yeah, it was like week 5 or
and
something.
it was like the middle of the split or something like that. And while we can't say that that's what's going to happen with Core JJ, it's very real that that's a possibility, which means that this whole TL Super Team thing may be put on hold and could really influence, obviously, how their spring split goes. Right, like it takes time to build up. So not only have you not been able to run the roster for lock in, but not being able to run that roster for real games that matter could stunt your growth as a team throughout the whole year, maybe even depending on how long this
Yeah.
goes on for.
From what we do know, apparently Ayla and Core JJ are splitting scrim time. This was in the upcomer article that got released, which this is how this news kind of broke. But there was nothing on the side of the Yeon Hansama thing. Like they didn't say those guys are also splitting scrims. So considering that was omitted, I would assume that Hansama's probably playing all the scrims, and they're kind of just getting Core JJ in there, and Yeon might not be as practice. Another reason why Yeon didn't look as good as Ayla.
Yeah. And I guess there is also the possibility, although I don't see it likely, that they sub out Whippo as well if they feel like that's the best way to go.
Who's the
Um,
TL Academy top then?
I don't know. I don't know. That's what I was about to bring up, is that I don't know who their top laner would be, but that would be their only other option out of the two options. I mean, it's looking right now that Bwipo is going to be starting regardless. That's what it sounds like. Um,
Bradley.
but that is an option that's still on the table, and so I just thought I would throw that out there.
Yeah, he's like a straight up amateur player. Bradley. So
Brad.
probably unlikely. Um, just because the other two guys are sort of prominent academy guys, have been in the scene for at least a year, I believe. Both Ayla and Yeon. Yon. Dude, I don't like Yon because like when I hear Yon, I think of like YA,
YAWN.
yeah, like I think of the
I know.
Pokemon move Yon. I don't think of like it's just weird champ, I don't know.
I didn't even know that that was a
Oh
Pokemon.
yes, Ayla
And
did play Nos. I know that. I looked that up the other day. Yes. But he's been in NA Academy for at least a year.
dude, what the hell does Yawn do in Pokemon? What is that? That's a
Puts it,
move?
yeah, it puts enemy to sleep after one turn.
Oh, okay. Well, I haven't played Pokemon since Gen 1, so Boomer Blue Jays out of the Pokemon loop.
Pretty sure Yon was in there that at the time.
Okay.
That's like a slowpoke
Uh
special, dog.
my bad. My bad, man. I'm sorry.
All right,
I'll try to
we got
catch up on my Pokemon stuff.
Dignitas. For whatever reason, I was talking about the scheduling earlier. Like FlyQuest has played 4 matches, Dignitas has played 2 matches, and everyone else has played 3 matches. So Dig's 1-1. They got destroyed by. I mean, maybe not even destroyed by TL, but they lost to TL. They kind of got destroyed, and then they also picked up a win off Immortals.
Yeah, I don't understand why this team only has 2 games played and FlyQuest has 4. Like that seems so weird. Uh, I don't know how this happened, but that seems really really strange. Anyways, um, the one thing that I'll say is there wasn't a lot of expectation out of Blue. Not even just for lock-in, but for the whole year. It was you're signing one of the worst LEC mids. I thought his Zoe looked pretty damn good in their one win, putting out a lot of pressure. And we'll get to Immortals in a sec. But regardless, even though Immortals looked quite bad in that game, I would say, and so did Power of Evil. I still have to give credit where it's due, and he was landing a lot of bubbles, getting a lot of picks, putting out a lot of damage. And so, yeah, only 2 games played, but not the worst start, that's for sure.
Yeah, I remember I was watching the VODs of the Doublelift Media Sneaky co-stream that was coming up, and Doublelift actually did say at the start of the TL Dignitas game that apparently um, Blue and the coach have like worked together in the past, and that might
Oh,
be
what's his
one of
name?
the.
Starts with an E.
I don't
What's that
remember what
coach's
it
name?
is, but that's, probably one of the main reasons why he got this spot in the first place. And Doublelift was kind of making like a pretty good point. Like, you know, this coach is probably kind of putting his career on the line a little bit, with mid being the most important position in competitive league and bringing in a guy who had a pretty terrible season the year before. He's kind of sticking his neck out for Blue. I just hope for his sake that Blue is, decent,
Hmm.
because if not, it's going to kind of blow up in his face.
Yeah, his name is Enatron.
Mm.
Enatron. I have to
They're
look it up
from
all the time.
TCL, I believe. They played together in TCL 2 years ago or 1 year ago.
Yeah, and I don't remember who I heard say this, so I apologize. I am stealing this from someone who made the good point that just because this guy played, it's not necessarily just nepotism. Like that's like a very simplified, oversimplified way of looking at it. Maybe the fact that these guys have been on a team together is the reason why he knows that there's more that Blue can offer to a team, and that
100%,
he
yeah.
knows. So, I guess the thing that I'm saying is, and that I've heard someone else say as well, and I totally agree, is that you can't just write off a guy because he had a bad year. Um, there's a lot more to see. I would say I don't think anyone can just have 1 year and look bad. We talked about Afromu earlier having like that bounce back season with Dig with his first year with Johnson. Anybody can have a bounce back year, and I mean we don't know what happened with SK. Lots of things were looking pretty bad over there, and so you
Treats
can't lay it all at
jungle
the feet of one.
poggers.
You can't lay it all at the feet of one guy, right? So I guess what I'm saying is you need to have a little bit more patience with someone like Blue and wait and see before you judge a player like that. And well, even this weekend we only saw 2 games, and from what we saw, it wasn't too bad. So pretty good start for him. Biofrost made his uh, return as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I remember his laning phase was pretty good, but they were also running Caitlyn Lux, which is like you're gonna kind of destroy people with that.
Yeah, that's some brain dead shit, dude. Don't be
Yeah.
don't be bringing that in here, man. Like, this needs to get removed now.
So, but here's what I'll say though: like they're still winning the lane, right? Like anyone could pick Caitlyn Lux, and the other team didn't ban it or pick it. So, I mean, they picked OPs and
Someone's
they won their
trolling.
lane with it. So you can't take that away from the bot lane there. But yeah, I don't think they'll get Caitlyn Lux every game and have like kind of free lanes like that. That's for sure.
I thought Bauerfus looked all right. I thought, maybe we'll see a bit of a similar thing with Neo again, where he's kind of got that veteran support. And they make a decent pair. Like we said before, Neo had a pretty good rookie season as well. And it's not like he's obviously downgrading at support with Aframu leaving, but it's not like, historically Biofrost is a terrible support. I mean, this is a guy who was a pretty good support for the most part. Obviously didn't look as good on season 10 with TSM before he took his break when he had Kabe
Or
and then went back to
CLG.
Double Lift. He wasn't that terrible on CLG. I don't think he was as bad as
Well, the other thing
everyone
I would
said.
say is that even if you look bad on CLG, that's kind of the norm, anyways.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. Most people look bad on CLG. Um, I'm a fan of Biofrost, so I'm really happy that he's back in the league. We'll have to wait and see again. Just 2 games. Need to wait and see more before I have more of an informed opinion. But again, with him, kind of same thing as Blue. Not such a bad start, honestly.
Yeah. And I guess the last thing to say about Dig is their Academy jungler XU, saying that right?
Yeah, something like that. XEU
He
or XU.
yeah, I thought he put out right. His Lee Sin game against Immortals was really good. But he did
Very
put out.
aggressive.
Oh, for sure. He did say on
He's taking
Twitter.
that second Q on Lee Sin. If he
Oh,
lands the first Q, he's taking the second one.
yeah. He did put on Twitter, basically alluding to the fact that he's not going to be playing next week, I think, and that he's kind of returning to Dignitas Academy. That obviously makes me think that River is going to be coming in
Right.
for the second half of their lock-in games. Maybe that's the reason they only played 2, is like because they knew River was going to be back for this next week, so they wanted to wait. Who knows? I don't even know, but I'm glad River's getting in there. I think it'll make their matchups against CLG and Evil Geniuses that much more interesting, because River was a really good player for PSG Talent, and obviously he's got his work cut out for him on the Dignitas roster, who is not going to be just on paper one of the best rosters in the league. But we have seen, a guy like, if I'm going to make a comparison, Xerxes on Immortals, who came in veteran jungler, was great in his league, and kind of like boosted the team around him and made the team, into pushing for a top 6 spot. So we'll we'll have to see if River can do that with Dig. Less likely, I think, just based off of their roster, but I'm hopeful.
Yeah, and I have the tweet here that he pulled up. I'm not going to read. Well, anyways, here's what it says. 2022 has already been absolutely insane, and I just wanted to give a huge thank you to the Dig LCS team and staff for giving me the opportunity to play in the lock-in tournament. I'll be returning to Academy team as of today, and will have my Academy debut on Wednesday. So, like you mentioned, doesn't sound like a guy that's going to be playing next week, and so that should mean that River will be playing.
I like
That's
how
kind
you
of the
said
hope.
that you weren't going to read the whole thing, but then proceeded to read
I
the
know.
whole
I
thing.
ended up. Yeah, I was going to say that, and then I was like, well, it may as well. It's really short. Yeah.
Okay, you want
Anyways,
to do CLG or Immortals next? Because
we could do CLG. They have the better record. They've earned it.
I
What are
guess
your
they've.
thoughts on CLG?
I still think they're horrible, man. Like, I don't
Dude, I
even know.
don't think they're that bad. Like, I really don't.
I,
Um,
I'm honestly just gonna call fluke on this one. Like
what was the fluke exactly? Because their one win was
Immortals
against
being so
Immortals, and
terrible and Turtle running it down.
yes. The other thing too that the one thing that swung that game specifically was Immortals did so okay, first of all, Luger and Poom end up solo killing Turtle because he's playing too aggressive. He's running boots 4 pots and he's just trading way too hard and doesn't even get to use he's trying to over trade to get the value out of bringing his pots to lane. Except he just traded a little bit too much and just died. So that's what starts giving the advantage to CLG. And then after that, Immortals finally start to get their feet back under them and they actually start to apply pressure back the other way in the lane. And then they go for like this dive that gets TP'd on from CLG. And remember, you can no longer TP before 14 minutes unless it's to your own tower. So Power of Evil could not use his own TP to join the fight, and they end up kind of throwing and just giving away another double kill to Luger, and now the game's just completely out of control.
Yeah.
Um, so do I see that happening again if these two teams were to play each other? No. But it's still something that CLG was able to capitalize on. You capitalize on the other team's mistakes. So what can you say? Um, the other thing that I'll add is that contracts was very hit or miss this weekend. Sometimes a little bit too. God, that one play against TL where he's like
Oh
really
God,
hesitating on
no.
the Hecarim. I pointed that one out to you,
Oh, I
Janky.
was
Like,
cringe when I watched it back earlier today. I was just like, bro, like if you're gonna die, just like if you're trading 1 for 1, just go trade for 1 for 1. Like, don't hesitate, bro.
but like, I still don't think CLG looked all that bad. Like, I don't expect them to beat TL or to beat.
I don't either, but I don't. I'm not like I don't think you're like ever supposed to opt into like 3v4 team fights when you're already behind. And like it's just like the problem is not like just the decision making's bad. That's the biggest problem. It's like I don't know, man. I'm just like already just
Their
done
two
with
losses were
CLG,
to
but
EG and TL, right?
yeah, but like dude, they're gonna get shit on. I don't even care. Like they're gonna lose. They're gonna lose their last game. They're gonna get fucking 0-2'd in the BO3s, and then they're gonna go like how many games is Spring Split now? They changed it. They're gonna go like 4-12.
18 again, I think.
They're gonna go 4-14. You heard it here first.
I mean, look, that is very possible. I don't know. I don't think that's what's going to happen. I think they'll be able to pick up more than 4 wins. I don't think this roster. I think we're holding on a little bit too much to last year's CLG. And look, the thing is that doesn't even mean this team's going to pop off. Let's be honest. They're still all a bunch of young players that are looking to prove themselves and that are very new to the league. So I know that's like a boring excuse, but it's true, right? So I don't expect that much from them. But I don't think you're giving them enough credit and just saying that they're just going to be doormats of the league. I do
Maybe
think that
like
Jenkins and contracts are still good enough to hold their own. And I don't think that I there's also a lot of hype around Luger as well too. Like I don't know, man. There's a lot of bad teams in the LCS, so I just don't see them only picking up 4 wins in spring.
maybe I'm being a downer, but like I need to see Jenkins win a game on a champion that's not Gangplank. I need to see
I don't think you're
contracts.
being a downer. I don't think you're
Like
being a downer. Just because you think a team's bad doesn't mean you're being a downer. You're just being
but I
honest.
just
I
like
just
it's
don't
only
think
one
they're
weekend of the
that
season is what I'm talking about. Like I was obviously like I'm giving like
bad.
FlyQuest and Golden Guardians and TSM the benefit of the doubt. I'm not giving CLG, but like I need to see Jenkins win a game that's not on Gangplank. I need to see contracts actually do something important and impactful on the game when behind, because it feels like when contracts is on these not so great teams, going back to his days on Golden Guardians when he was over there, like when behind, this guy just it seems like he just loses all like he just loses his whole brain and just like
I
makes four
need
engages. He just goes in like when you're not supposed to go in. I don't even know. And then
I
dude,
need
Pal
to
Fox is
push
bad.
back on the Jenkins thing. I need to push back or not yeah, on the Jenkins thing. You need to see him win on something that's not GP. Is GP like heavily banned against CLG? Like what's wrong if he wins on GP? There's
But
lots of
it's
guys
just I'm
that have
saying,
made careers playing very few champions and you know what I'm saying? Even if he plays a bunch of GP games, if they pick up wins, who cares?
hey,
Who
well,
cares if it's on GP?
enemy team needs to ban GP because they'll win the game then.
Yeah, that's the key to
Yeah,
you know how they have like keys to the game for like stuff like
yeah,
that? That's your key to the game. Just
yeah.
ban GP.
No, but
Free wins.
I am hopeful for Luger. He has been like a pretty hype prospect for like the last 2 years when I think he was on like 1907 Fenerbahce in the TCL, then went to 100 Thieves Academy, and they looked all right. I mean, I'll give it to them.
Okay.
They solo killed like Hansama and Ayla. Buggers.
So the other place that I kind of agree is that I'm not all that excited about Palafox either. I know there's lots of Academy fans or even like analysts that are still saying like Palafox has got it, and
Bruh.
maybe that's the case. The thing is, I don't watch that academy in the first place. We always say that to our listeners that we are not big academy watchers. But the reason why is because like just because you do well in academy does not translate to on stage in the LCS. And while it was only 1 year with what I would say was definitely a bad year, I would say a lot of the problems that FlyQuest was having was that they were getting stomped mid all the time. Like
Yeah.
the good performances that came out of Palafox weren't uh there weren't a lot of them. Let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so even if what people are saying about how he performed in academy is true that he was great, I would just weigh what I've seen in the LCS so much as being so much more important than what he's done in academy. And so until I see otherwise, I'm with you on the whole Palafox thing. I have nothing against the guy, but I'm not waiting for him to absolutely pop off. And if he does, great. But I'm just not expecting. That's all.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Um.
Immortals. Was there
Yeah.
anything else on CLG, or are we talking about Immortals now?
No, Immortals is 0-3. Um.
Where are
So
we starting, man? We
I
gotta
was
start
gonna
somewhere.
say in quick summary, they've failed the basic rules of their team. Game one, Wild Turtle inted, and like whenever Wild Turtle ints, you lose the game, no matter what. I don't care what's going on. Game
You could say
two,
that about anyone, even if the
game t-
name isn't Wild Turtle. But go on.
game two, Power of Evil was not playing a control mage. They
Which one
lost.
was that one? Who's he playing?
He was playing TF and didn't do shit.
Okay, TF.
And then
Yeah, no, TF is still. I don't know. I think of TF as
And
kind of like
then
control mage.
game
But go ahead.
three, Revenge runs it down. Like I'm telling you,
Yes,
bro. Like when Revenge runs it down, they lose. When Turtle runs it down, when it doesn't matter whatever team he's on, you lose. And when Power
the
of Evil doesn't
biggest
play a control mage,
problem.
you lose. They
The
failed
biggest
the basic
problem with
rules
that
of the
game.
team.
Yes. The biggest problem with that game, the revenge one, was that they put so many resources and spent so much time getting him ahead, which to be fair they did. He was I mean, he blind picks the Jace and then Fake God takes Malphite, which later on Malphite will be fine into Jace, but he does get absolutely smashed in lane. And we did see a huge CS advantage. I don't remember what it was, but I do know that Revenge was owning. But then this is where Blue came in and was just landing bubbles all over the place on Revenge. Revenge got picked off like 5 times. So the biggest problem was that you put so many eggs in the Revenge basket, and then you just hucked the basket off the cliff because he just kept getting picked off, man. So that one was true. The what you were saying about Power of Evil on TF is absolutely true. He was definitely man, Blue had more impact on that game. Was that also that was the same game, right?
Yeah.
Against Dignitas?
Uh huh.
Blue had more impact in that game on the Zoe and being able to roam than Power of Evil did on TF. TF made like 1 or 2 roams, and I don't even remember if he had any if they picked up any kills off of them or
No,
not.
I don't think he got a single kill with his TF bars.
Yeah, so really disappointed with Power of Evil on the TF. Really disappointed with the Jace pick out of that was kind of NH. Honestly, yeah, that was NA Jace.
It's a
And then,
fucking
like
meme
you
that'll live
said,
on forever.
they're sprinting it in the bot lane. Even Xerxes didn't honestly like he didn't stand out as poorly as the rest of them, but he didn't look that great either. And some of that is when your team's absolutely running it down, you're not going to look that great. The only thing that he looked good at was when he was getting revenge ahead because they kind of just camped to the top lane and got an advantage there. So I'll give Xerxes the credit there, but not a lot to be excited about with this team, and definitely probably the most disappointing team of the weekend. Definitely the most disappointing team because this is a
Yeah.
team that people were saying could break into the top 5. And while that still could be the case, like I mentioned earlier, they could be this year's Dignitas. Uh, it was rough, and
Yeah.
it was hard to watch some of these games. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Um sorry, excuse me. I feel like that's a semi decent little segue because, we kind of mentioned the game quality wasn't the best, but that's
Mhm.
not surprising to most people. But, after the first day of lock-in, it was pretty surprising, honestly, to hear the viewership numbers come out that like the total viewership for the first day of lock-in was like 186,000 in comparison to the LEC, which was almost 550,000.
Mhm.
Obviously, there's going to be a bit of a difference between NA and EU just in general. EU's numbers have always been higher for the last basically like 3 years, pretty much ever since
For
the
many
LEC.
reasons too.
Yeah, for many reasons. I think a lot of it has to do with the LEC rebrand and what they've done on the the broadcast production side. But like they're tripling our viewership. That is not a good look at all.
It's not surprising at all.
But like
I'll,
I
I'll
like I
give
would
you
I would I would have expected double. Like that's fine with double, but like triple, like that is bad.
I will do my best to give you all of the reasons why this isn't surprising. Um, if I can remember them all. I know there's like 4 or 5. I'll try to remember at least 3. So the first one that comes to mind is lock-in don't mean shit. The games don't matter at all. We saw we saw TSM Academy play half of Cloud9 Academy. We saw Golden Guardians play all of their academy. They played a fucking coach. 6A is coaching Golden Guardians, by the way. Um, so there's that. The games don't matter, whereas LEC games do matter. Obviously, the one that everyone is thinking in their heads is the LEC is just a better region. You're just seeing better games. The reason why I you'd if you or I were to open a stream and play League of Legends, Nolan, no one would show up. Why? Because we're not that good. Like you
Pretty
want to
good.
watch people play at the highest level. And so if you have the options of watching pro leagues, you're going to sink more time into the better leagues, right?
Mhm.
Like the LEC is just better. And we've seen that for God knows how long now. I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years that it's been clear that the LEC is better. So that's the second reason. The third, and I think people forget this also, is that it's way easier for NA to watch EU than EU to watch NA. And I know there's probably some EU listeners that are going to be like, no, that's not true because I stay up late and blah, blah, blah. But for the average person, if you're watching like the LEC, you could watch in like the afternoon when you're in North America. But if you stay up, you have to stay up pretty late to watch North America. So that's another reason. What else? I named 3 reasons. I promised 3, but I thought there was one more that I could have in my head. Regardless, there's lots of reasons why the viewership for EU is going to be better than the LCS, and so I guess I just have to say I'm not surprised.
Yeah. Um like I said, I wasn't too surprised, that at the LEC obviously has more viewers, but just like seeing the number and reading it off the page was definitely a bit of a surprise to me. And like, they were kind of talking about it on the Double of Media Sneaky Co stream, like are there even potential fixes like to make lock in a more hype tournament to garner more viewers? Is there anything that they can possibly do? Or is this going to basically just turn into another failed project that just gets scrapped at the start of next year? Because, like back in, I want to say, when was it? Like season 6, everyone was talking about how there needs to be more international events in League. And like there needs to be more like region versus region stuff. And that's how we got Rift Rivals. And I felt like Rift Rivals,
Mhm.
when it first came around, I think season 7 was the first season we ever got Rift Rivals. Like that was like super hype. And it was really cool to see in the middle of summer split, or I don't remember if it was spring split, we would see the top teams from each region go to one of the 2 regions and they would play each other, and you would see NA versus EU,
Mhm.
and you would see LPL versus LCK, and you would see like back when the LMS was still around, the LMS was part of that, and it was like LMS, LCK, LPL, and it was sick. But then like 2 years later, players are talking about how this is a waste of time. One of the regions has to fly to the other region. There's jet lag. It just
Yep.
kind of ruins their next week when they have to fly home in terms of their like actual split performances, which actually do matter because Rift Rivals doesn't matter. It's just bragging rights. And at this point, like I feel like this is just going to get scrapped next year unless like some pretty big changes are made, whether it's to the format of it. Because dude, 3 weeks, like I gotta watch 3 weeks of this shit, or
So
something to do with the rosters because like dude, like you said, we're seeing Golden Guardians Academy and TSM Academy and half of Cloud9 Academy and like fuck knows.
I do agree with you that it just sucks, the current situation we're in. However, I think that there's not an obvious solution, and that's why nothing has been changed. And I think one of the reasons why lock-in is so long is because we should expect this every year. Every year there's visa issues. Like this has been happening for like 3 or 4 years now, where it's like the visa issues are delaying the start of the season. So to me, whether it be lock-in, let's say even the regular season started this weekend instead of lock-in, it would still suck if some games that actually do matter are being played by academy players. Like I think
But
that's
at the
still a
same
problem.
time, do you not think that it's, kind of on on the team's radar more because hey, like the games actually do matter right now, January 15th, like this counts towards your spring split record. Don't you think, back however many months ago when teams are designing their rosters and trying to acquire these different players, they're getting on that right away, not knowing they have this like extra 3 week buffer and like I don't know, just like 3 weeks of hey, we can just play our academy roster should our guys not be here on time.
I don't think that changes anything because I think every team knows that the visa and green card and all that stuff, all those issues is always a long process regardless. My thoughts are as soon as the rosters get finished, they're working on that ASAP. And so I don't think it's a well, we have 3 weeks of lock in, we don't got to get to it right away. I just don't, I don't buy that that's what's happening. I think they are getting to it as soon as they can. It's just a very slow process. And so regardless of whether the regular season is starting now or whether it's lock in starting now, I think you still have the same problem every year that you won't be able to have full roster. And so even though I think it definitely sucks that there's 3 weeks of lock in, I don't think it fixes the real problem, and that's that the rosters won't be full. That's the main problem, and I don't know how to fix that because I already think that the season. I don't even think the seasons should be starting this early, regardless of league. I don't think the LCS, LEC, LCK, or LPL should be starting in January, which I'm pretty sure is an unpopular opinion. The reason why is because I think that we see a lot of burnout every year with players because they don't really get a break. One of the reasons why we have such short careers out of some of these players is because they get washed, and I think a big part of that is due to burnout. Now, of course, not all of them get washed. I realize that, but the amount of time and effort that you have to put into being a league pro is just not sustainable for years and years and years for the majority of people. And so I would prefer if there were a longer break and that the season did start in February for every other league. The problem is if you're the LCS and you decide to start in February, which is what's happening now, it's like as a fan, I'm like, dude, I got to wait till February while LEC and LCK and LPL are starting. I just want to watch those leagues instead. So it's like if you wait that long, you're doing better by the players and giving them a break, but you're also screwing over your own product because everyone's just going to go watch the other league.
Kind of, well, this is still related to this topic, but not related to what you've exactly been talking about. One thing I was kind
Hmm.
of surprised to hear about was like every region and every league just started playing on like patch 12.1, like right from the get go. Like the patch dropped, and then that same week, like leagues are playing on that patch. And I was just like, don't they usually like wait a little bit, or don't they usually release the patch, a couple weeks in advance? Because the main thing to talk about there is like this is the first patch of the TP changes. And I
Hmm.
remember hearing, I don't even know whose stream I was watching, but it was a pro player stream. And they were talking about when teams were scrimming and, players were sort of practicing during the off season with the knowledge that, hey, these TP changes are coming in. Like people were like purposely not TPing to plays when they were playing on the older patches and scrimming on the older patches because they knew this was coming. And I just thought that was kind of funny. And like normally, the pro leagues are always like, oh, we got to wait and get the data, and then like, oh, because we don't want to like have these guys play on the patch right away. But then everyone started playing on patch 12.1. So I'd be totally fine if they started like 2 weeks later, they got some data on the patch, the meta was sort of figured out, and then we started.
Do you think what I said makes sense though, or do you agree or disagree or anything like that? Like my thoughts that the leagues should all be starting in February? Is that
I don't know. It's as long as for me as it doesn't detract from the overall number of games played in the season, I don't see a
right?
problem with it. But for example,
And that's
like,
difficult to do, right? That's
oh, for
difficult
sure.
to squeeze in the schedule that they have in shorter time, which is a fair argument against my point of having them start in February. That is a fair argument. Sorry, you were saying?
Well, I don't know. That's all I was saying. I agree.
Okay. Yeah, so honestly, I don't think that there's an obvious fix, and I think that's part of the problem. And I do believe that we are going to see. I think Travis said on Hotline League tonight something along the lines of like he wants lock in to stay, and something along the lines of like under a normal year, the lock in would be hype if the teams had all of their players. But like to
That's
me,
gonna happen
this
every
this
year.
is a normal year. Like yeah, like I don't think this is an abnormal year. And so with that, I do think that we're going to see the end of lock in. I don't think that it's going to. I think people are really not excited for lock-in, and I think that it's gonna go goodbye if this is what's gonna happen every.
Yeah, I was gonna say, but you kind of just answered my question. I was gonna say, give me a prediction. You think lock in is the same next year, different next year, or it's not even there?
Uh, I could see them going one more year. I think it will eventually be gone for sure, regardless, because I don't think it's a problem you can fix of having the players show up, and I think it's just less exciting. I just don't know if I don't know what's more hurtful to your product. Continuing to do the lock-in tournament while everyone else has real games going on, like while the LEC has like hype actual matches, or by not having anything happen and waiting 2 or 3 weeks later to start your season, and then everyone could already be so invested in LEC, for example, that they don't even care about LCS. Like, I think both of those scenarios hurt your league very much. And so, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know what you do about that.
I think they'll probably make some changes to it, whether or not it's with the scheduling and trying to shorten it maybe from 3 weeks to 2 weeks. Whether it's maybe putting some sort of roster restrictions on teams where they can't just like completely fuck off and just throw their academy roster in, or maybe there's some penalty for having to put your academy roster in, and you haven't gotten your roster together by some specific date. I don't know if they would do that. I don't know what they would do about it, but I
I
think they'll
don't think
make
you
some
can do
changes
that.
to it.
I don't think you can penalize teams for not putting in their full roster because we know already what a regular season is like, that you don't get all your players when you want them because of visa issues and whatnot. And so I think if you were to do that, I think you're just penalizing teams and players for things that are out of their hands. And so I don't think that that's really a good solution either. Although I totally understand why someone or why you would want to implement something like that. I just don't think it accomplishes anything, sadly.
Hmm. Okay, well, you can't
Yeah.
forget about our weekly awards, our pop off and bean soup. Week one of
hmm
lock in the books. Who was popping off on your radar?
I went with Vulcan. Um, just because I believe that the competition for him was a little bit more difficult than Blabbers. The other thing too is that the pop off performance really was the recon, and one of the things that I thought was so like uh not poetic, but fitting perhaps, is that Ignar used to be a really good recon player. And that's what, like, when Ignar was on FlyQuest, I thought was his best champion. And I wanted to see more of it on EG. And now Vulcan goes into EG as the support and pops off on the recon, being the one to find flank after good engage after good engage, and pretty much is the reason they win that game, in my opinion. And so I mean, I didn't think that it would be an upgrade, but I thought that definitely this weekend Vulcan was an upgrade over Ignar, and I was doubtful of that before the season started. So pop off Vulcan.
Yeah, there was pretty much two choices. It was either Vulcan or Blabber. I guess I'll have to take Blabber. I was pretty much gonna pick whichever one you didn't pick. Because I definitely would have to say like those two guys, were the two players who shined the most over the entire weekend, not just on their own team. Both of them played really, really well. And I think we'll, in Vulcan's case, hopefully see some more consistency out of him, because that's what sort of it felt like in the back half of Cloud9, both kind of in season 11, but specifically in Summer Split. And we were kind of seeing Vulcan have some not so good games, but then some really great games. But
hmm
we were seeing a lot of inconsistency with him, which is the exact opposite of what was happening in season 10 Cloud9, where Vulcan was like pretty much just smurfing the whole year.
Yes, absolutely. I think you're 100% right. The consistency for Vulcan is what fell off from season 10 to 11. We saw some of it, but not as much. And so, if we do see that consistency, you have now a top tier, maybe even the best support in the league, depending on how good Corey JJ performs.
Yeah, like in season 10 and the start of season 11, like people put Vulcan right up there with Core JJ. It was
Yep.
not obvious who you were
Hmm.
taking.
Yeah.
And then Beansoup, you can go first cuz if you say what I'm going to say, I'll pick a different one. But I have
Oh,
some.
which Immortals player should I pick? I went with the bot lane because I specifically gave a lot of criticism to Immortals bot lane last year, specifically Race. I thought that even though he did have some like really nice performances, I remember like Draven and he had one really good Ziggs game. There was not a lot. Mostly, I thought Race was quite bad, and so I thought, hey, we know what we're getting out of Wild Turtle. We should expect at least a decent bot lane, and they were probably the worst bot lane we saw this weekend. So absolutely bean soup for Immortals bot lane. Very disappointed, and I want to see better from them.
Yeah, I got to go with Revenge. It's when Revenge is inting, it's not a good time for Immortals. And
Yeah.
or if he's just not even doing anything cuz
Well,
there's
and
like there's inting Revenge and there's like do absolutely nothing Revenge, and doing nothing Revenged is just like a nicer version of the inting Revenge.
I remember last week you said something about Revenge running it down or something. I don't remember exactly what you said. And look, I know that that's no secret. We know that Revenge does have those games every once in a while. But it's just funny that last weekend I think you mentioned something like that or something about Revenge running it down. And well, we saw it. So bummer.
Okay, I wanted to do I don't like we can call them predictions or whatever, but I wanted to do a little bit of a lock-in week 2 preview because we only have 5 more matches for all the teams, and that's on Friday, and then we're jumping right into quarterfinals on Saturday and Sunday. There's
Hmm.
5 matches left to play. I'm just going to run through them quickly, and we can say just really fast who we think is going to win. We don't have to put any thought in between it. First match,
Okay.
Dig CLG, who's going to win?
Dig CLG. I'll go CLG because you're gonna say Dig.
Dig. Next up, the big match, 100 Thieves versus Cloud9.
I am gonna go 100 Thieves. I'm really happy with what we've seen out of Cloud9, um, but I think they haven't been tested yet, and so we'll see. That one I'm on the fence, but I'm going 100.
I'm going to go Cloud9 because I'm biased here.
Big surprise.
Immortals versus Team Liquid.
Dude, on Hotline tonight, Revenge called in and Gyoto was the guest. Gyoto hard fight. If people for some reason haven't watched Hotline League yet, definitely go and watch that call. It was actually so funny how much Gyoto just hard flamed Revenge, and Revenge basically said that it's just going to feel better once they beat TL. I don't know if I'm that much of a believer. However, I want Immortals to win, but I'm still going TL. But the back and forth between those two was great.
TL for me. Golden Guardians versus TSM. I'll go TSM. Academy v
Yeah,
Academy.
TSM, whatever.
And then lastly, EG versus Dignitas.
EG.
Okay, so with the results of those matches, in my scenario of things, I would have
Mm-hmm.
Cloud9 in first in that group, then 100 Thieves, then FlyQuest, then TSM. And
Okay.
therefore, quarterfinal matches would be between Cloud9 and TSM and 100 Thieves and FlyQuest. And in your little
Okay.
world, it would be 100 Thieves versus TSM and Cloud9 versus FlyQuest. So
Uh
again,
huh.
I'll take you again. Quick prediction. In your world, 100 Thieves or
100 Thieves and
TSM.
Cloud9 are moving on.
Okay, so both those teams are winning. I'm going to say the
Yep.
same despite the matches being different. And if we flip
Mm-hmm.
over to Group B, our matchups would be EG versus Dignitas in your world because you picked CLG to beat Dignitas.
EG and TL.
Okay, so I'm
I
going to
mean,
go with
come on. Are you saying anything different?
no, but I just wanted to know. But
Okay. Yep.
EG versus TL. But the 1 and 2 seeding does matter because I believe the way that semifinals work then is the 1 seed from one group plays the second seed from the other group. So in that world, in the semifinals, you would have 100 Thieves playing Team Liquid and EG playing Cloud9, whereas in my world, I would have C9 playing TL and EG playing 100 Thieves.
So you want me to predict again?
No, I'm just saying like that's the difference. That's all. It's the seeding matters there.
because yeah, I guess we'd be getting a week ahead in advance there. We'd be getting
Yeah.
1 week too
We we
far ahead
we
of
we
ourselves.
can wait on those, but I just wanted to point out how like the
Okay.
C9 versus 100 Thieves matchup is very important because while they're probably going to win their quarterfinals match, it makes it so Cloud9 has to play either Team Liquid or EG, and like any of those matches are hype, whether it's C9 TL, EG, 100 Thieves, 100 Thieves TL. Like semifinals are going to be some good matchups.
That should be, yeah, I was just going to say that third weekend of the lock-in is when we should really start to actually get hyped for LCS. And I mean, I know there's some people that are already hyped just because the season is back, but I'll be blatantly honest. I'm more interested in LEC right now than I am in the LCS. The games matter.
You're
Once
just
we actually start to
loving
see
it
some
because
good teams.
Vitality's running it down.
Yes, I do want to talk about them, by the way. I was going to get to them in just a sec after we're done with this, but what was I going to say? Oh yeah, once we start to see some actual good matchups and best of series, I think that's a time to be excited, even if the games don't necessarily count for the regular season. You do learn a lot from those series, and I think that's when fans should expect to be more excited. I think.
Okay, well, I'll say our one little thing of quick news if you want to just talk a little bit about some other region stuff. Um, Hey, guess what? Really quick news. There's only one thing. They're retiring ProView on February 1st.
Yeah, I'm
Sick.
not surprised. No one really wants to pay for it, so yeah. Um, yeah, I don't know what to say. I'm just not surprised.
Yeah,
Who
it's
like it's so dull. Like we've seen it before. It's really dull watching it because there's no like half the there's no the casters are casting like a full game, right? They're not casting for that specific player. So even if you're hearing the casters during pro view, they're talking about other things going on somewhere else, or there might not even be any casters. I don't remember. The point is like if you're watching one player, you would want there to be a discussion about what that player is doing in that lane. And so it would be great if it was made free so that content creators can do something with it. And that's something that you can use to get people more excited about your league or this player or that player or whatever.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, I'm not surprised. You need more than just the player pro view for it to be a good product.
Yeah, it's the Riot Games special to release a feature, release a product, and then not change anything about it for its entire existence and then get rid of it. It's literally the Riot Games special when it comes to League. They do it every time. They'll add a feature, they don't change anything to it, and then they get rid of it. Eternals, Clubs, ProView, the list goes on.
Hmm. Yeah. So that was it for quick news. Now, the last thing that I wanted to say before we closed out the show is yes, I am enjoying Vitality lose, mainly just because it's an EU super team. I always, for
There's
people that
not
don't
been a
know,
single EU super team that's ever done well.
I am always cheering for the dog shit teams in Europe. Like almost always, I think, actually. I like Excel. I liked well now they're BDS, but I liked Schalke. Those are the kind of teams that I cheer for when it comes to the LEC. And it'll vary by week to week. I'm not diehard for any specific team. So that's why if people are wondering like why is he loving Vitality losing? That's why. I just always cheer for the underdogs and seeing the super team get clapped is just kind of funny. Um, the point that I wanted to make, or what I wanted to talk about, is that the narrative now is that Perkz isn't performing well and he's washed because he went to NA. And I knew this would happen. I'm not surprised. Now here's the thing: Perkz can still turn it around. I totally believe that Perkz has the capability of getting back to his former self. But that's not the point. The point is, and JNT is obviously the best witness of this. I've been saying for quite some time that Perkz was not at the top of his game, and that he was nowhere near the top of his game pretty much the whole time while he was in North America. And so I would argue that he was washed before North America. And yes, I understand that a lot of times pros do become washed in North America. I think this is one of the instances where the narrative is false and that it is actually not NA's fault for washing up Perkz because I think he started to become washed before he came over. J&T, do you disagree or do you agree?
I mean, I just think the term washed is thrown around a little bit too
It
loose.
is. That's true. That's true.
Especially like yes, Perkz was obviously not, the best North American player when he was there, but for the majority of times in crunch time, Perkz performed. And I think that has been like apparent throughout Perkz' entire career. While yes, most of the time he's been the best player in his role. But when Caps rolled around in season 7, like that didn't exist anymore. Like he wasn't the best mid. Caps was the best mid. I think, Perkz is still unanimously the best, Western player of all time in terms of accomplishments, in terms of,
Yep.
career and everything. But
Agreed.
since season 7, he wasn't the best player in his role. And going back to North America, like I would say for the most part, he was probably a third to fourth,
Yes, that's
3-4
exactly
mid
what I was
laner.
about to say. I was just going to say Perkz was an above average mid laner in North America. He was not the best, and he wasn't really close to being the best, and he was definitely not the worst. He was an above average mid laner. Now, if any North American above average mid laner went to the LEC, how do you think they would perform?
I don't know. I
Not very good, I don't
well, I
think.
don't know. I think mid and LEC is not as good as it used to be personally.
I
Um,
agree with that. I agree with
so
that as well.
I mean, I guess I would have to need another example that's not, Perkz. Like we saw Niski. Like Niski went to North America for 2 years, came back to Fnatic, and he's great.
And
Um,
I definitely, the thing is for me, I thought Niski was the best mid or one of the best mids when he was over here. I know I've said this, I say this all the time, but that split that Blabber won MVP, Niski was my pick. I thought Niski was the best mid laner in North America at that time specifically. And so, yeah, I don't know him going over to Europe. To me, he's not going over or going back to Europe as an above average NA mid. He's going over there as a top NA mid, top tier NA mid.
mhm.
So I don't think that they're necessarily the same. And my point to bringing up all of this is that if you were to send an above average North American mid laner to Europe, I think they would struggle. And that's what we're seeing with Perkz right now. And the narrative that I saw on, yes, it was Reddit, to be fair, but the narrative that I saw on Reddit is that, oh, he went to NA and now he's washed. And it's like, bro, what have I been saying for the last year? I've been saying that he wasn't that good. That doesn't mean that he's bad, but he wasn't that good. And so I guess what I'm saying is I'm just not surprised.
Yeah,
What can I
I
say?
guess the other thing to say is like Perkz was never judged on his like regular season performances and him being this like hugely dominant player throughout the entirety of the regular season. The reason why Perkz is talked about in the way that he is because of his performances in the clutch moments in the best of
Yep.
5 series and when it really counts. Like that is what we know Perkz for. We know Perkz because of his quarterfinals matchup against RNG, his LeBlanc in Game 5. We know Perkz of, back when he won that split with Cloud9 and Spring Split. When playoffs came around, like he turned back into playoff Perkz. He was playing really well. We know Perkz because of that LeBlanc performance in that tiebreaker match against Rogue. When yes, he was kind of running it down, but he was also carrying the game. Like
Yeah.
for me, I'm not judging Perkz on his regular season performance. Yes, you can judge him if he like continues to run it down and Vitality misses playoffs or Vitality is like a 5th to 6th place team. But like, man, if Vitality, like, what's the saying? Like, as long as you're in the dance, you're fine. The dance being playoffs. Like, you just got to get in. And then from
And
there
the
on
thing is,
out, it just matters. Like, playoffs is
it's not even
matters.
that I want Perks to fail or anything like that. I'm just, you know me, I'm so tired of people not accepting how a player is performing. That's what drives me nuts. When have to hear about how EG should have gone after Doublelift because Doublelift and Jensen. That's another big discussion that people are going after, and it's like Doublelift was not that good towards the in the last year of his career. Doublelift was not that good. He was an average 80 carry, and him being them taking Danny instead of Doublelift is a no-brainer to me. And I think people are starting to see that now. But there was a lot of people, and still is a lot of people that are surprised EG wouldn't go with Doublelift. And to me, like that's not even close.
We're
I would
getting dislike
obviously take the
bombed.
young.
Doublelift and
What's
Perkz
that?
slander on this show.
Yeah, I know, right? It's not even
Jesus.
like uh, for me. It's just I want to hold players to the level that I see. Like I just want to be honest with what I see, and I can't. It drives me so insane when people are saying that a player is performing better or worse than what they're actually performing, and that they don't let go of that notion. Now, the other thing that I'll say with Perks, even though I'm totally enjoying watching Vitality run it down right now, this quote unquote super team, I do think it would be absolutely fucking awesome if they continue to sprint it half the season. They make that final playoff push and then they go on a huge run. I would love to see a Perks resurgence. That would be amazing. But until he starts playing well, I'm not going to pretend that he's still playing like the GOAT when he is no longer the GOAT. He may be the GOAT. How am I wording this? He's not playing like the GOAT. Do you get what I'm saying, JNT?
When you're the
You get
GOAT,
what
you're
I
the
mean?
GOAT. It doesn't matter.
What's that?
So when you're the GOAT, you're the GOAT. Doesn't really matter. Like
But do
you
you get
have
what
that
I'm
title.
saying
I
though?
get what you're saying, but
The criticism should be based off of how you're playing not now, not how you played years and years ago.
no, that
That's
that
what
is
I'm saying.
true. Yes, that is true.
And that's what I mean, I've talked about this so many times on this podcast and it gets me fired up every time because I don't know where some of these narratives come from. Um it's just it blows my mind. So anyways, I do think it would be one of the best stories of the year if Perkz did in fact have a resurgence and then starts to 1v9 for the struggling super team. That would be a good story. That would be amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, I think I'm done with my little rant.
Yeah, at least
And
he's
I
fun,
think
man.
at least he's great. Highly recommend. Highly recommend right now.
I pegged Fnatic as the front runner. They looked the part. Um, yeah, Upset and Hillsang are just disgusting. They're so good.
Yeah. Anyways, I think that's a good note to end on. We thank you all so much for tuning in and sticking with us as we start to get back into the swing of things and as the LCS starts to get back into the swing of things. We'll remind one last time, if you haven't hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, leave a comment, all that stuff. And yeah, we thank you so much. This has been episode 69 of the Clown Fiesta podcast. Say nice.
I was gonna say insert obligatory nice comment. Nice.